welcome to the Romance Writers Room. I hope everyone is doing fine. Before I say hi and we go into intros, I wanted to touch upon because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are like, wait, where is Deidre? She had a situation that couldn't make it today, and Tiffany was the MVP of MVPs and agreed to come in and talk about with us about interracial romances. So now that the disclaimer, whatever it's called, is out of the way, we can do intros and then say hi to the peeps and get into the conversation because this is, if you thought World Building was a juicy and fun one, this is coming up great. So let's go ahead and start with the introduction, starting with this and wrap it around to me.
Hello, friends. I'm Desiree Ortega. I am one half of the romance writers group, a duo, Desiree, my co-authors right down there, and we have at least 17 books currently published on Amazon. So, by all means, run on over if you love romance, which you may if you're here. So, I stream over on Twitch. I have a YouTube video, Coffee Reading Writing, and those are the places you can find me.
There also are some interracial relationship books there as well.
Yes, there are a few. Yeah, there's a few interracial.
So yes, hello all. I am Tiffany, TLRS Lifestyle on all the interwebs. I too write under Desiree as well as TLRS. TLRS does not have as many books, but we do have a release coming on Tuesday. So, and I said we, like it's me, myself, and I, all personalities. But there is a release coming on Tuesday. I also stream every other Thursday for PJs and Scribbles and one Saturday a month for Saturday Shorts. And Nia and I took it and ran with the idea of the small world in small towns and everything else. And we decided to start a podcast called Small Town World. I have to remember because when I thought of it, I was thinking of the song Small Town Girl. Just a small town girl. So it's Small Town World, and we will be back for our second episode. I think it's next Saturday. So because right now we're doing the first Saturday of the month, and I think that's next Saturday.
Yes. Yes. On your channel or hers?
My channel.
Good to know. Hi. For a hot second, I forgot. I'm like, who am I? Hi, I'm Esther Maria Andujar. You're in my channel. I am a Puerto Rican writer aspiring to be a hybrid author. I was gracious and happy enough to take the mantle of the spinoff for the Romance Writers Room. The initial brain of this brand is a Writers Room run by Tiffany Russell, Morgan Lee, and Barrett Laurie, that they have let me take on this thing that we're still creating. I write things. I do YouTube sometimes. I stream here on Sundays at the same time. The Romance Raiders Room happens the Sundays that they don't happen. Yeah. You get it. The description box will have the important resume things. I'm just gonna get into the topic because I'm just excited about this. Anytime we talk about representation, I am here for it, and I'm excited about it, and I am so looking forward to talk about interracial romance, not only with Tiffany but with Desiree because they have good amount of interracial romances and they are done so good, so good. I just like the little, like the things that you get into and kind of like in the culture without like spelling it out to be like, oh, this character is so and so. You don't learn it that way, you learn it by their living their lives, and I'm just like, yes, I'm here for it. um, I'm super, super passionate about this. Um, and since I brought this in, research. What kind of research do you guys do when you have an interracial romance?
Does life count?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think for me though, that's like the biggest part. I know a bunch of people who are in interracial relationships. I've been in interracial relationships. I know people of different races, and so I think that that's a lot of it. If there are certain things like sometimes I don't know, say, how someone who is Afro Latina might
Mm,
react to something. But I'm fortunate enough that I do have people that I can ask questions of. And then if not, we live in this wonderful age of internet. Um, so generally you can look it up, like if you want to know what they would call an aunt or a grandmother,
mm,
or what might be like if they were having a fancy dinner and they were inviting, over their significant other, what might be on the table,
mm,
type of a conversation. And I think that that's probably, I've always looked at writing any type of character, whether it's in an interracial relationship, whether it's like, a different race than myself, a different sexuality, whatever it is, writing a character and then figuring out where we need to put the steps to show that, because nothing drives me crazier than when you get those books that it's like, oh, let me beat you over the head with the fact that they're this.
mhm, mhm.
As opposed to just letting them be a person. It's like,
Exactly.
no, they have to roll their neck and their eyes and they snap their fingers and they have to, girl this and that this and it's just so much. So yeah, so I like to like let them be that character and then figure out where I need to put in like
No,
the
that's
slices of this, the moments of that.
exactly. Which I would say definitely when we wrote Bookish About Love, that was one of the things. One of our characters is Filipino. And so that was more of a stretch outside of what I grew up around. So I live in Florida, and so we have obviously Hispanics, we have Afro Latinas, we have Black women, and so I guess I feel a little more comfortable in those spheres. But when it came to like this Filipino, I was like, okay, I need to do a little bit more research. But one of the things, I think one of the actual reviews we got that was very um flattering was the fact that they specifically said that what they
Food?
enjoyed was that we didn't like beat their head
Oh
with
yeah.
the representation of this character, that we just did just enough to like that we made it feel authentic to their culture, but we didn't smack them over the head. So it was the little things, like Tiffany said, they're a person. and
Hmm.
and technically Filipino American, so they're American, but it's
Hmm.
obviously little aspects of their culture from their parents that we made sure to sprinkle
Yeah.
in, about like little things like, oh, they grew up taking their shoes off at the door. Not everyone does that.
The
They
I
food.
love the tidbit about the food. I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is something so like regular because you see in other romances just characters going about their day and making food, and it's just a matter of switching to a food that fits into that culture. It
Hmm.
really is not it's like every character that you read out there has some at some point or another is eating something or is cooking something. It's
Hmm.
just a little it was like a 1 or 2 line of what they
Mhm.
were making, and one was just like, "Yes!" Like, they are just going about their day, and probably someone who is reading it is Filipino, read that, and they're like, "Oh, I ate that, like, yesterday." And going about their day, but they felt seen
Mm.
without being, like, punched in the face that this character is Filipino, and
Yeah,
they're
make them
like,
into a caricature practically. Exactly.
I
yeah.
love doing I did one and it was a ghostwriting project, but uh the girl's mom was Hispanic. And
Mm.
so whenever she was lecturing her, she would switch to Spanish. And she'd be like, I know. And like, like I had her almost translated in her head so people
Mhm.
knew what it was she was saying, but it wasn't so much like, here, I'm just gonna have her grandmother only speak Spanish, or anything
Mhm.
like that. It was just kind of like that. And the only reason it felt right is because I remember in college, one of my friends, her mother is German. And whenever she would get in trouble, we would be in the middle of her mother yelling at us, and she would just be like, and then you did this, and you did this, and it would just switch just automatically. And the rest of us would be sitting there like, what is she saying? What is she saying? What is she
Without any-
saying? And that's the only reason that felt natural to me.
Mhm. Mhm. Spanglish for us Hispanics. Yeah, we're.
Yeah. I do tend to put a lot of mija when I'm writing,
Mm.
especially not every Hispanic, but if I'm writing a specific age in the Puerto Rican culture, I'm like, they're gonna mija everything.
The crap out of
It's just
you.
that
Yeah.
if they specifically are in this age bracket and they are Puerto Rican, regardless if they are in the island or in the US, they're gonna mija everything.
Yep.
Sometimes I had to
I
go back
get.
and be like, wait, how many mijas I have in a
I
single
know.
page?
I had. There were a
Fill it
couple. There
out.
was a couple for our characters that when I was writing certain chapters, I would be like, okay, make sure I don't push this too much because this can get easily out of hand.
And it is,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a fine balance,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
you always want to have enough where it's representation, but you also don't want to go too far. And
Mhm.
sometimes you don't, like, you almost need a second eye
Yeah.
to tell you when it's too far, because you know what it's like in your culture, like
Mhm.
how people do it in your world, but also things translate differently when you're reading.
Yeah. And
So,
obviously, someone who's not of that culture, those little things are going to stand out to them more because it's
mhm,
not something they're familiar with. So they'll definitely catch and latch onto them way more than us. That
Yeah.
if we're familiar with the culture, then it completely rolls right over us. And
Exactly, hi everyone.
everyone,
I'm telling
I've
you,
heard,
and
I've heard him. I've heard him when we play Minecraft. It's awesome.
my mom stopped me hiring people, but I have a few aunts that will
Mhm.
mija even like pets. Like mija is a very much a crutch word
Uh,
a bracket of people. It is hilarious.
yeah. But so what I would say when it comes to research, like do your research, do a plethora of research for like the way we do with any story. Because ideally, you're going to do a lot of research. You're not going to dump all that in the writing. But when you do the research, you'll have it in the back of your mind so that you can sprinkle it about in the
mhm,
subtle ways that makes this character feel authentic without turning them into a caricature. Because then that's where you start being obnoxious or offending people.
yeah,
So you want to be
Yeah.
very careful and deliberate about like they're just a person like anyone else. They're
mhm,
gonna, especially if they're American, if they're whatever American, or they've lived in America for most of their lives, then clearly they're just gonna be like everyone else with little subtleties that match where they grew up, who they were around, all the little things, food, music, culture of all sorts. So
mhm.
yeah.
And that's another thing too. I always don't know where to point. Uh, is take, especially if you're having them not be a first generation American of some sort, because like I've had Hispanic friends, I've had Asian friends, um, I've even had European friends where they don't know a lot of their culture because
Mm,
their parents who immigrated here like restricted it because they wanted them to blend.
mm,
So
Yeah.
also
To
take that
assimilate.
into account as
Hmm.
well, depending on what type of person you're writing.
mm.
Because it may be that person where the grandma is speaking Spanish, but they don't know what the grandma is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or something, or the grandma reminds herself, oh, no, we're supposed to be speaking English, or the mom
Yeah.
has to translate or something, because I do definitely have people who that's their reality of
Yeah.
being Asian American or Hispanic American or whatever.
Yeah. There's like, and this is the reason that extensive research, and I don't remember which author said this, that all the research that you do, you end up using like 10 to 15% in the story, but you do need all of that research for the character to feel real. And that's what every author is trying to aim for, the character to
Mm-hmm.
be real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when representation feels right, and that's pretty much how you get yourself away from like bad representation or problematic representation. um because you have done all of the research that you need to do, and you're like, okay, so what is actual thing? If this is the person that they are in their day to day, they're not gonna be saying or behaving all of this. A lot of this are just like micro things that no one's gonna pick, especially not in.
Mm-hmm.
So, like
And
for example, with a lot of Hispanic Americans, you have to build the background of that character, because there are Hispanic Americans who are fluent in Spanish, and
mm,
there's ones that are not.
mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of the in betweens, and this
Mm-hmm.
is where the no sabo, kind of like word hashtag whatever they have. There's a set of Hispanic Americans that are calling the same themselves the no sabo, and it's pretty much because they have a hard time dealing with dealing with verbs in Spanish, basically.
Okay.
It's just that. But they know a pretty good amount of Spanish. It's just like when they talk, they almost always use the wrong verb, which is completely okay, because everyone messes up verbs. Doesn't matter the language, we all mess up verbs. Like, so depending on how you build the character, you know if this character is going to be fluent at the
Mm,
language, or completely oblivious and dependent on someone else, or they're in the between, that they're like trying but they're limited because they just don't know the entire spectrum of the language. And that
mm-hmm.
can happen with Asian Americans and Black Americans that come from Africa because they have their own languages, and they came to the US and they're learning English, and they're like juggling between two languages, because it just happens to bilinguals. Like you can,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you spend days with me, you know my English is gonna be like going from like, oh, she's like top notch today, and then 3 hours later is like, oh god, her English is just like damn full. Let's find a translator.
And I know that like when it comes to researching for another like type of culture or race can feel overwhelming because you
Mm-hmm.
may not know where to start. And that's where like what Tiffany said in the beginning, there's the story. You have the story and then you want to then figure out where to sprinkle certain things in. So if your character is going to have dinner or they're going to make breakfast, what that's a time to go, well, maybe their what would their parent have made them, growing up and stuff. There's something to research. They're going to put on music, maybe they're feeling nostalgic. There's something to research. What kind of music maybe would have been popular in their culture. So as you write the story, that's when you can figure out little things to, because it is a lot. It's a lot to just dive in and try to figure out where to touch base first. So let the story guide you like you do with any type of plotting and world building and things like that. And according to what your character needs, that is then a key little moment that you can look into researching for their culture or their race.
And I'm going to step a little out of contemporary for a moment because I also do paranormal.
Mm,
If you are writing a paranormal, it is also very important when you're doing that research to look at the time frame, because someone who, say, grew up in Ireland in the 1800s is going to be different than someone who's in Ireland now.
Mm.
Someone who grew up in America in the 1700s is going to be different than someone who is, African American, Hispanic, Native American even now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you are going to go in that time frame, or you do right to that, and this is not just like speaking vampires, because there's plenty of paranormal creatures that live hundreds of years, or you can create one that does. um um like, always remember to look at that specific time frame,
Mm.
because those things could be different. How they are addressed might be different. How they relate to other people might be different. How they look at other people might be different. How they look at other cultures might be different. So always kind of keep that in mind if you are on that paranormal side of the
Mm.
romance than necessarily just the contemporary.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is.
I am for all like definition, Marina Vampire, it is interracial romance. Because before she was a vampire, she is Puerto Rican. He is not. He is white as a paper. He's a white boy.
He. Oh.
So it is interracial romance. Not only because she is a vampire and he's not, but also because she is Puerto Rican and he's not. He's like
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I don't know, whipped cream, something like that. Homeboy is white. So
Fuck.
there is that, like, I can say that not only did I had to do research for her because her age put her at a time that I know I learned, but I am not an expert in my own culture. Because there's a lot of pain regarding to that. Because if I remember correctly, she was human during the um cane plantations happened in Puerto Rico. So that is a very painful history
Mm.
in Puerto Rico. So I was just like, I'm gonna do enough research to know her mental stage when she was human and when she got changed, because
Mm.
she got changed in a very traumatic way too. That would kind of like carry on her vampire life. But besides that, it's just a lot of their differences is more like she's 100 plus years old and he's
Mm-hmm.
like 20 something.
She's a
So there's
carnivore.
yeah. So
No,
there's
I
that. It's
feel
just
that, Esther, because I don't know where this idea came from, but I was like, let's make a vampire who can time travel, and she was changed in the 70s and she was a Black Panther, and then let's send her back to like the 1700s where she falls in love with a slave owner's son. Why does that
oh
sound like a fun idea?
jeez. This trauma upon trauma upon trauma.
All the angst. All the angst.
It was so much fun. Like, I was like, ooh, like there were so many different, and like that's something you also have to think of is like the cultural differences. And like when they first meet, she's like, you're kidding, right? But they meet because he's actually helping smuggle slaves to the Underground Railroad. So like she's just like, I don't trust it, but I kind of, but what? Hold
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a lot of like things in there that does lean to, he's like, let's run away together, and she's like, what are you, crazy? There's no place we can be together, like, in this time frame, and he's supposed to be like, his marriage has already been arranged to like this white
Mm-hmm.
chick from another plantation, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna do it, but she's like, you have to, like, don't you understand the world that we live, or you live in, rather.
Mm-hmm.
And then she comes back to like modern time, and then she's like, this badass vampire. And it's just like, it's very confusing in her head that, she's stuck between these kind of two spaces. So yeah.
Interesting. Hmm.
That definitely is a very angsty read.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the I think it might be a good way to like touch upon race without making the book about race.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause nowadays, like, if there's race in the book, people either don't want it at all or they want the entire book to be about it. And it's like,
Mm.
we can have in betweens, friends. We can have in betweens. Um,
Margaret is hilarious.
yeah, this was very fun. Better, it is a better version of Batman. Um, I do want it to, this kind of like will feel a little redundant, but I want to touch upon it because I've seen it a lot in reader space on social media and it's not being discussed enough in author spaces. Like the conversation is going pretty well on the reader space, but it's almost like a lot of authors like we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. And I just want to like spell it out the differences between what
Mm.
makes a black romance, what makes a Latino Hispanic romance, a Latino Hispanic romance, what makes an Asian romance Asian, what makes an interracial romance an interracial romance, because they're different and they might seem obvious, but we know common sense is the least common sense out there.
Mm.
So
You mean it's not a dime and a nickel?
Mm.
I mean, I keep telling my mom it should be common. She's like, you will be constantly surprised, and I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, but I, whatever. People are peopling. Um,
What's the saying?
common sense isn't always so common. It is not. It's just
What's the
like,
one
wow.
my aunt always says? Like sometimes, well, she says it about somebody in my family, but sometimes she's like, he is just way too, he's so smart, he's dumb.
Yeah. So smart that they missed the mark just by a millimeter. You're like, you were so darn close.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, she
Almost
says
so
all the
close.
time, she's like, oh, God, he's so smart, he's dumb.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and go through the differences and you guys can agree or disagree or add on. Okay, so Black Romance, both main protagonists and the love story is between black characters. Both of them have to be black for it to be Black Romance.
And they can
Same
be
thing,
biracial,
yeah,
but
but
it
they have
does
to
still,
be
there
black.
needs to be some black element to both.
Yeah, it could be like a black biracial, like a black Latina or a black Asian, but they have a black line ancestry running through them.
Through
Mhm.
her buttons.
Same thing with Hispanic and Latino. And I'm making this specific choice of word because a Spanish person,
Mm.
let's say a Colombian person that is interracial, that is not Hispanic. Spanish people, Spaniards, are not Hispanics. I want to make that clear.
Uh-huh.
Just because they speak Spanish doesn't mean they are Hispanic or Latino. If you
Nope.
are Latino, you're from Latin American. If you're Hispanic, you're from a country that speaks Spanish, but it's not Spain, because that's where the actual language came from.
Mm-hmm.
This is why Brazil is not a Hispanic country
Mm-hmm.
because they don't speak Spanish. But they are Latin Americans
Mm-hmm.
because they
Mhm.
are from Latin America. But this has to it's
No, this is good.
be a
People don't
little
know.
complicated.
I do have to
It's
ask a question.
geography.
I do have to ask the question. I don't know if anybody else is
Hmm.
going to come up with it in the chat, but while you're talking about the distinctions between Hispanic, and Latino. Can you speak to what is it, the Latina X?
Okay, so yes, this came with the LGBTQIA plus movement.
Mm-hmm.
This is people in the community who are Latino trying to find a more inclusive use of the language. Spanish is a very gender specific language. Like words have genders.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way that this language was built. Um, it doesn't in because there's a lot of non-binary folks who are from Latin American countries and also are Hispanic. They don't feel comfortable saying that they are Latino or Latina because they don't feel the gender that that word represents. So a lot of people use the X because in English, X is kind of like a very inclusive and very general um, letter to use to not signify a specific gender. But in Spanish, using the word the vocal E is the other way that you can gender less.
Neutralize.
Yeah. Neutralize sounds like I am cutting something.
Yeah, never mind. No, yeah, that's true.
I'm just like I'm just like taking the gender out of the word.
Yeah.
So if I didn't consider myself a Latina, I will probably, depending who that, and this is me, because I do speak both languages, I could use Latine with someone who is speaking in Spanish because it flows easier. But if I'm using English, but I'm using that word, I'm probably gonna use Latinx because a English speaker person might be more used to the usage of a X on a word to cut the gender out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's still a very controversial topic.
Yeah, I hear.
Just ask the person which word they prefer to use, if it's Latine or Latinx. If you're gonna include it on your book, make sure that you know the reason why your character prefers one or the other.
Hmm.
Yeah. I just wanted to
Don't
bring it
pop
up because
out.
I know some
Don't
people
pop
don't
out
know.
and be like the character
Honestly,
doesn't
as a
mind
Hispanic
either.
woman, I didn't fully know. I
Yeah.
didn't understand. I was like, what's happening? I didn't know, but that's because I'm also, typical straight,
Yeah,
female. So I wasn't aware of, like, I was very confused for a while myself, as why are we now adding more to, like, as it is.
yeah.
It was already a thing saying, are you Hispanic or are you Latina? Like, that was already
Which is
kind of like
hard.
a, ooh, what, so I was like, I don't even want to get into the rest of it, because as it is, just those two, like, distinctions create sometimes controversy too. And so for me, I'm just like, I'm a Hispanic woman, period. That's all I
Oh,
know.
I
But
get
it is
it
important.
because are you black? Are you African American?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Same with Asians. Are you Asian or you're Asian American? This
Mm-hmm.
these are the this is why research is so important and for you to build the backstory of your character and where they grew up because it's important to know it's my character Hispanic or Latino or they do prefer to call themselves Caribbeans.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, me and Deidre, we are Caribbean, but both of us we're not Hispanic because
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't speak Spanish. We
Mm-hmm.
are Latinos, we're Latinas because the Caribbean is part of Latin American, and we are both Caribbean, but we're not Hispanic. And it's just learn those distinctions enough for you to create a character that is not going to offend multiple people. Someone's going to get offended.
Someone. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, but
Well,
it.
I have a character who is from India.
Mm,
He refers to himself as Indian, even though there are some Indian people who refer to themselves as Asian. But he
Mm-hmm.
does it because he, again, it's a paranormal book. He was brought up when India was still under the rule of, or like heavily under the rule of England.
hmm
So therefore, that's how he views himself. And so you do have to kind of watch those type of things,
Yeah,
because even in cultures that don't necessarily have these specific, what language do you speak, what this do you know, and it also begs that question, you can still have an interracial relationship if one person's from China and one person's from Japan, just because they're both Asian, one's Japanese and one's Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still an interracial relationship because there's two different cultures there.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I wanted to. This is a funny comment. Spaniards always make me think of they'll be wearing a conquistador helmet.
I
Same,
love that.
same, Margaret, same.
I love
And
it.
if I ever go to Spain and I don't see a single person with those weird metal helmets, I'm gonna be.
I feel like you're not going to see
I'll be
some.
yeah, I know. I'm still gonna be disappointed.
She's gonna come back feeling all kinds of ways, guys.
Yeah. And this is really cool. Mixed race
Mhm.
between characters do give you an alphabet soup. So there's a few mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, white male,
Um,
white woman, black male, Latino woman, white man.
yeah. Uh, it has been a point of contention. And we're
Mm.
just navigating it the best that we can. I I'm gonna give props to some family members and friends. I know a lot about this because I my closest cousin is gay, and one of my closest friend is a trans man. So I it is my responsibility as a family member and as a friend to educate myself about these things. It's it helps with being an author and like writing things, but it's more on a personal level that I have the responsibility to educate myself and not commit so many errors when I'm talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is interesting, and I will have to Google it because I don't know everything. I am not the greatest at geography either.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I cannot say that they will call themselves. They probably call themselves Hispanics, but not
Mm-hmm.
Latinos,
Mm.
Mhm.
or they might just not call themselves either. They might just call themselves whatever is the term for this specific country, or they might call themselves Europeans.
That's
Like,
possibility because Filipinos speak Spanish too, but
yeah,
they're very much like we are Filipino.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
They're
and they will
closer.
they will tell you they're not Hispanic, even though
Mm-hmm.
they know Spanish. But that's because of colonization, and not because they
Mm-hmm.
want to.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have their own native language. Like
Mm-hmm.
Spanish is a second language, not their native language.
True.
Mhm.
Um, if Taino language would have stay in Puerto Rico, then we will probably call ourselves more Taino than Hispanic, because then we
Mm.
will see Spanish as a second language. But because the Taino language did not survive colonization, then our native language is Spanish.
Hmm.
So, if in an alternative universe there's a Puerto Rico that made possible that that
Ooh.
language
I
survive,
know. I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept to
I
play
know.
I have so many ideas about alternative Puerto Ricos, so I can share backstage, but not live.
with.
Let
Hmm.
me see what else. Dolores says that after watching a video, she uses Latina most often. I more often. Uh, Honestly, for me is. depending on the language that I'm using and who I'm talking to. Um, I got to learn about this when reading Hector Tobar's book Our Migrant Souls. He also talks to Chicano, which a few still prefer. Yes, there's still
Mm.
a lot of people who prefer to be called that way. Um, yeah, don't get me started on biracial terms. Our poor kids are biracial.
Mhm.
Uh, this is so funny. I'll call myself Wonder Bread, white, or queer annoyance for my patient husband.
Love you, Barrett.
That is funny.
Mm.
Um, you really have to do your research and know your characters. I write Romanian Americans and had to do tons of research. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because they get misrepresented so often.
Mm.
Um, yes, someone will be offended regardless of how knowledgeable you are or even your own experiences.
Mm.
Don't tell me about it. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a pretty good amount of life that I get questioned about my own life experience and my own nationality, and I'm like,
It's very
do
annoying
you
when
I live
want to move
here.
here? I'm like, do you want to move here and tell me otherwise?
it is annoying when you do write something and it is like obviously you're not the character, but it is something that either you've experienced, you know someone who's experienced, you know someone who's lived that, and then someone comes back to you and they're like, "Well, that just doesn't feel real." And you want to just be like, "Are you kidding?"
Oh.
Yeah, it's just
Mm.
yeah, there's a
Mm.
lot of languages in Philippines. No idea what Equatorial Guinea folks will label themselves. Look it up in I looked up in Central Africa. Yeah, it is a country in Africa and their language is Spanish. That's their native language. But probably they will call themselves Africans. That's my guess. But again, I will have to like Google or magically know someone from there and ask them, how do you label yourself?
Do tell, please.
Just it's just it is strange. Just to like a roundup thing. This is so hard even for me. I've started to transition to calling myself Mexican American, then Hispanic because I don't speak Spanish fluently and and feel American. But you still this is the thing that I wish people wouldn't have pushed down immigrant or first generation of immigrant people. If you speak a little bit of the language, even if it's just a little bit, you speak the language. You're not fluent at it, but you're still using it.
Mm.
So if you speak Spanish, even if it's just a little bit, you're still Hispanic. You can call yourself Hispanic because you're
Mhm.
using the language. Not maybe as fluent as someone who was born and raised and only uses that language, but you're still using it. Like, don't.
And it's in
People
your blood. It's in your
would,
blood. It's what your
yeah.
background is. It's where you came from. And
Also, don't do the job of the bullying people who will try to tell you that you're not Hispanic because you're not fluent in Spanish. No, don't do that.
and then of course at the end of the day, whatever feels right for
Right.
you, for your own,
Mm-hmm.
what you choose. Like what Esther said, definitely don't make that decision because of what others maybe would be putting on you.
Hmm.
But if that's what you feel like that's what you identify with, then by all means, do you. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, my response will be like, "Thanks for that input, Becky. I recommend living in Hicksville." So wonderful. Yes, yes.
You know, it was a
Everybody's like,
mistake.
everybody's like, oh my gosh, yes, I've written about stuff that has happened to me, and people have commented, this is virtually impossible. I'm like, yeah, sure, bud. Always you, always magic. I love this. I love this. That's probably gonna be back from now on. I'm like,
It's new,
yes,
magic.
it's totally impossible for you because I am a magical person. So what's
Yeah.
impossible for you is totally possible for me.
Yeah. Mm.
Just call me Harry because I'm that magical person. I was going for a rhyme. It didn't
You
work
were almost there. You were so close. Close.
Oh, that was, you were so close.
You had it. I
Obviously,
was
I'm
with
not
you.
magic.
I was
There you
with
Oh.
you. Oh my
go.
Hmm.
god.
I hope you guys can keep learning because,
Yes.
again,
Mhm.
exposure, like you, and this is kind of like a parenthesis, but one of the reasons that I love traveling a lot is because traveling outside of your comfort and like going to places that are not exactly like yours are great experiences for you to grow as a person. It's
And can
just,
I
and
just
also it's great for being a writer. Like you can, like you learn more and you can
Mm,
apply to it.
mm,
can I
Yes,
just
Tiff.
say, and I can't speak for Esther or in my right hand, them too. Um, but one of the reasons that I enjoy writing, whether it's interracial relationships, whether it is like a cultural relationship where it is, a black romance or an Asian romance, or, even an Irish romance or Scottish romance, whatever
mm,
it is, we live in a world, and I'm going to try to say this without causing drama, um, where differences aren't always accepted and
mhm,
aren't always looked upon as, oh, I would like to learn about that. But here we have this wonderful opportunity where we can teach and we can share with people about these different cultures and these different people, whether it be in a romantic way, a funny way, a tragic or drama filled way. We can share that with people subtly where they
mm,
may not get that they're learning and being more tolerant of other people, and that they're figuring out things that they may not have known. And at the end of the day, and that's why I started by saying characters are just characters, it
mm,
doesn't matter if it's interracial or not, is because at the end of the day, maybe it shows somebody that this Asian person or Hispanic person or Latino person or Jewish person or whatever culture you insert is just the same as you, with maybe just a little sprinkle of seasoning, maybe just a little different food group, or maybe just a different cultural tradition,
mm,
or something. It's showing people that at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same. Like we all have something we can relate to. And that's like the beauty of what it is we get to do in
yeah.
this conversation, is sharing that. And yeah, we do the research, but also it helps expand us. Like Esther said,
Mhm,
she looks at doing this research because she has people in her world that
mhm,
it directly affects. And you don't know who you have in your world that this could directly affect, or for that matter, it could broaden your world. And now you have extra people. And that's like, yay! So, I fully recommend, like, even if you don't write it, read it, because
mm,
there's so much to be gained and understood and learned from this lived experience.
mm. Here.
Yeah,
Good
exactly
deal.
like Nia says, sometimes it's sharing that people who don't look like you are so much like you and not the negative stereotypes that, you know,
Mhm.
society and media pulls out, just
Mm,
pushes out
mhm.
to everyone.
Exactly.
I love that everyone is like, yes, Tiff, preach. Yes, Tiff. Tiffany knows my food needs some
I have
yes,
Twisted Bear. He
Tiff.
does like a little
Like
spice.
an extra little spice.
He might be biracial
Um,
without even knowing it.
yeah.
It's in his blood somewhere.
You just gotta adopt
Uh,
him. He can come to the cookout.
this has been Tiff TED Talk. Yes. And
Thank you for coming to TikTok.
this is wonderful. One thing that I would like to, because we've been like on and off touching up on it, but how cultured might influence the way the romance like
Mm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
shown on page, the way it's like depicted, the way you maybe choose which scenes you're gonna show. Because culture, sometimes religions does affect the way
Mm-hmm.
people court each other, in
Mm.
the way the happily ever after is talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Hmm.
I'm
I'm
not
thinking. I'm
Jewish,
like,
but
I'm
I
thinking.
swear to you,
Tiffany
just
is
from
the
watching.
minister of cultures.
I'm not Jewish, but I swear to you, just from reading like Jewish romances, I'm like, I want, if I ever get married, God willing, my husband to step on a bottle and break it,
Mm.
which is part of their culture. I will happily appropriate that. I'm going to talk to some Jewish people and make sure that's okay. Um, but I just think that's an amazing like cultural thing that they have. But I do agree that there are certain, even from the shoes
Mhm.
um, coming into the house, or you know
Yeah.
I was brought up in a very almost militarily strict African
Mm.
American family where you didn't answer somebody by going yeah or what,
Mm.
huh?
Mm.
It was yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, ma'am, yes. There wasn't a lot of slang in the house.
Mm.
So you have to know those type of things because sometimes that in and of itself, just the way you address somebody in a culture becomes
Mhm.
it was very much the kid sat in the kid table and you don't get in grown folks business. um, and so again that might be something to that you have to take into account if you have say a single parent relationship where one of the parents is African American or Black. Like that might be something where another culture might be like, yeah, let's bring the kid in and ask them this. And, the parents like, what? What?
Mhm.
Type of a thing. Or, like the kid might call that person Harry and she's like, it's Mr. Harry. Like, excuse you.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
you put some respect in that. So yeah, like you have to know those just small little cultural things that could make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, a
Other
lot.
thing,
Mhm.
yeah, for similar. I mean, I'm not gonna say is every single Hispanic culture, and it also depends on the holidays. But I can say, and you can tell me if it happens in your household too. Des, like there's especially like Christmas, those type of holidays. It's almost like a given that everyone is gonna cooperate in the kitchen. Like, regardless if you're good at it or not, they will find you something to do because it is a family thing. We all get together to celebrate the holidays. We all gather around in the kitchen and it is like super noisy and busy and you're bumping shoulders and butts and backs and like you're and sometimes little kids are like in a little corner just like trying to do something even if they're just there just to have them there.
Mhm.
And this might change based on the size of the household.
Mhm.
Um, and it might change how much, um, if they are Hispanic Americans, how much they have internalized the American side. It might
Mhm.
change, it might
Mhm.
not. But I do remember here in Puerto Rico, my family is like usually the house that they choose to do the holidays is the one that has the biggest kitchen.
Mhm.
Everyone has to be there.
Mhm.
Even if you're a guy, they will give you manly things to do in the kitchen. You have to be in the kitchen too.
Mhm.
And you have to at least show up. Like
Yeah,
you may not have to stay the whole time, but you better show
yeah.
up. I better see
You
Mhm.
better you
you.
better be there like 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah. No, facts. It was like that more when I was younger because we were surrounded by more. I would say like honorary family kind of deal. Um as we got older and we got more spread out and we became smaller unit, things did change. But yeah, and that's one thing that I would say when it comes to culture and writing. A lot of times it's a matter of, at least right now, it's a matter of looking at the biggest change will probably happen for your character's parents and how your character is going
Mm,
to interact with either the love interest's parents and vice versa. And that is probably what's going to affect their story the most when it comes to cultural differences. Is that, wait, maybe one family culture is very strict about certain things when it comes to courtship and marriage and stuff, while the love interest didn't grow up like that, and so they're a little more open to switching things up, and maybe your character, that's not what they grew up with. So you definitely, as of right now in time, because generations are changing, but at least right now we're still in the time where our parents are very much ingrained in whatever they grew up in, and
mm-hmm.
they are trying to put that on our generation. So that is where some contention may happen between your love interests when it comes to different culture aspects of who they are and where they came from. So that's
And
something to take into consideration.
Des
And
also
see, this
just
is
said
a very good
something.
difference. Like, we both are Hispanic, but in Flores culture is all the women, not the men. But in Puerto Rico, it's like if you have a working feet and working hands, you better do what the oldest woman
Mm,
asks you to do.
mm-hmm.
Like,
Des
just because you're a guy doesn't mean you're not doing anything.
Des touched on a really good also cultural point when she said we had more kind of adopted family or like something like that. Like I have a bunch of aunts, not a blood relative in the bunch.
Mm,
Some cousins. I don't even know where they peoples came from. Um, but it's
Facts.
like that family thing where, I have godchildren and nephews that I'm not blood related to their parents, but I grew up with their
Hmm.
parents. Like I went to
mm,
school with their parents. I've been friends with their parents for like forever. And that is very cultural. That
Hmm.
it's just like, the kid comes out and you're like, that's just Aunt Tiffany. And they're like, okay, Aunt Tiffany. And you just
you're
grow
an
up
official.
that way.
Yeah.
And it never even occurs to you that they may not be related, or even like I have family that is related. Can I tell you how? No, but if you ask, that's my cousin. Um,
Yeah.
that's my
And
aunt.
it's
Like I
funny.
don't know how they're related.
It's
They just are.
it's funny. I don't know if it's every Hispanic household, and I'm not gonna say every Puerto Rican household is like this, but the two sides of my mom's family are like incredibly huge. They definitely had no TVs. We're talking about 15 to 20 uncles and aunts. The thing is, like, the family is so big that it's hard for me to say, oh, she is my mom's cousin. No, we're just saying she's my aunt. That's it. She's not
Mm,
really my aunt because she is not a sibling of my mom, but
mm,
because she
Mhm.
is a cousin of my mom. And it is hard to explain that to anyone else that is not in a Hispanic household. It's just easier to say, oh, she's my aunt.
mm-hmm.
My grandma's sister, I call her aunt. She's not really my aunt. She's my grandma's sister.
Mm-hmm.
No, she's an aunt.
Yep.
Everyone
Yeah.
who's like takes too long to explain
Explain.
aunt, an uncle, or a cousin. That's
Yep.
that's why you
Yep.
end up
You know,
with like 20 cousins, 30 aunts, and 15 uncles.
I have married in family and trying to explain to people how this is my
Yes.
uncle who married my aunt's sister's daughter's daughter. Like,
Yeah,
who? I'm like,
it's
dude,
so
that's my cousin.
complicated.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Now, I did in college though have a friend I used to drive her crazy because she never wanted to insult anybody you might know. And so she would be like you would say so. She's like, you know what? Your aunt's sister's next door neighbor's girlfriend from college who married the guy across the street's daughter's best friend. And I would go, Lucy? And she's like, I can't stand you.
They will always make up a name.
I am I'm like half sorry, Margaret, because it can get confusing. And like if you're in a generation where there's already 3 to 4 generations on top of you, where people have been like calling each other aunt, uncle, or cousin, like it's just we try to explain, but the moment we see confusion in someone's face, we're like just like they're your cousin. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it, they're your cousin. Or
Yeah.
don't worry about it, they're your aunt, they're your uncle. Just Tio, Tia,
Yeah.
just go on your merry
Exactly.
worry about it. Because
I'm
it
like,
can get really complicated.
yeah, because half of the family members I have, because my mom was an only child, but her mother had sisters and brothers and this and that. So everything for me is either second, third, fourth. I'm like, no, 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 no. It's just my cousin.
No.
You
That's my
know?
Yeah.
aunt. That's my uncle.
And
Done.
here's another
Oh my
example of how that plays out. My Girl Scout leader was, well, I mean, she still is. She's white. And I'm friends with her daughter. Like we still get together at least once or twice a year.
Wait, they can stop being white?
I know, I didn't know that, right? But like it's a group of us, and 3 of us are black, and like 3 are white, I think it is. And like when we first all moved back here, we all went to dinner, and she's like, I gotta see everybody. All my girls are all grown up, you know. So we set up a whole dinner for all of us, and we walked in, and we were hugging her, and we were calling her Mrs., her last name, because as kids, that's what we got her. And she goes, oh, you're adults now. You can call me Debbie. And we were like, no, we really can't.
That
like,
ship is not. Nope.
we really can't.
You are forever Mrs. This.
Right.
Yeah.
And like that's a cultural thing that you can put in there. Like, was it my cousin lived with his girlfriend for forever, and she still called my uncle Mr. Jack.
No.
It never occurred to her to call him just Jack or something like that. Whereas, like, I've walked into boyfriends' houses and their mom's like, "Oh, call me Linda," and I'm like, "No, I can't."
You're like, no, and it's somewhere in the back of my generation, I'll get skinned alive. No, 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 we're not.
Right? Like, I'm like, I can't go home and tell my family. Linda said, but Linda was like, I'm sorry.
Excuse.
Yeah. Like I have a aunt who was my aunt because she married my uncle. They are divorced like at this point for a couple of decades. She's still my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were my aunt throughout my entire childhood, teenagehood, and part of my adulthood. That's not gonna change. You're my
No,
aunt until you're dead. You're dead,
too
and I'm
many,
dead. Like
too many
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
yeah, it's too many years.
Mm,
Well, also, it's just,
I'm
how
gonna
do you
go
change
to
that?
your
That's
comment.
just what you've said your whole life. How do you think to change it?
exactly. Because of some paper
Yeah,
formality.
yeah, and again, you are calling them man, Mister, or uncle or auntie for your formative years, and then you want them to call now you're like call you by your first name? No, that's not happening.
My
Like,
father has one friend that I do not put a Mister in front of his name. And the only reason why is because I said it. And in all fairness, I met him when I was like an adult, right? But I still called him like the first time I met him, I was like Mr. Harold. And he goes, oh no, you are way too close in age for that. That makes me feel old. I know I'm so not close in age, but I was like, okay. But the first time my father heard me do it, he turned around. I mean, I'm in my 20s, right? He turns around and looks at me. He's like, excuse you? And I was like, he told me to.
Insisted.
yeah.
I was like, I'm not getting in trouble.
We're back to our little kid self. We're like, I didn't do it. So as you can see, there is much nuance to cultures and
Mhm.
families. So there's definitely research to be had if it's not something you're familiar with, because it will affect how your character responds to things like
Mhm.
Tiffany just went through, and how the parents would respond, and all those little things that make your character 3D and more authentic.
And
Yes.
I'm gonna put it out there because we say it all the time. Sensitivity readers are there for a reason. Cultural readers are there for a reason. If you're
Mhm.
not sure, this is where you can go. And even if I understand not everybody has the money or the
Yeah.
resources or the ability to find these people, although they are very easily found. But even if it's just cultivating a really diverse beta reading group,
Mm,
or even if it's just finding alpha readers that maybe aren't from your natural circle of people, reaching out and find there are so many Facebook groups and different groups that you can get into where you can look at who these people are that are asking to be your alpha readers or your beta readers, and finding people who may be Hispanic, who may be Black, who may be Filipino, who may just be culturally more open than you
mm,
are,
Mhm.
and go with that, because there are ways of knowing and they will tell you.
yeah.
you know so
And
there is
be
a good
open to
thing
that.
to have these people in your world.
Be open to that feedback and critique. Don't be
Yes.
offended by being feeling like you're being put in the wrong, or we're all learning. Be open to learning.
Hmm.
If you're choosing to write about people, because characters are people most of the time.
Mhm.
If you're choosing to write about the human experience, then you want to do that in a way that feels authentic, even if you're putting them in outlandish circumstances. You want these people to feel real. You want your readers to connect and get invested in who they are. So do the due diligence of making sure you're doing right by, when you're writing other characters that of different races and cultures that are different from your own.
And it's not changing your characters or taking something away from them or
Mhm.
putting them in specific boxes or anything like that, or trying to label you a certain type of, because some people be like, well, if I talk to them, then they're gonna think I'm right. No, like, nobody's thinking you're racist. Nobody's saying that you're culturally unaware or uneducated or anything like that. It's more enhancing your character. It's more bringing
Mhm.
more life to your character. It's making that
Yes.
character a full person. It's making that character somebody that your readers can engage with and like enjoy and relate to. And like, look, we're human and we've grown up in this world, and all of us have certain biases.
Mhm.
When it comes
Yeah.
down to, just if we're going to be butt honest real, all of us have certain biases because we've
Mhm.
either grown up with it, we've seen it, we've heard it, we've something,
Yeah.
right? And not all of us have everybody in our world. Some of us have lived very
Mhm.
sheltered existence.
Mhm.
So reaching past that is a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't look at it as you're being punished because you wrote something bad or you didn't write the correct thing. Look at it as like, wow, I get to grow. I get to
Mhm.
find something new. I get to make a better character that people will love.
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah. And also make sure that you know what culture, the definition of culture is.
Mm.
Because just because the character had a situation that changed their life and how they're gonna go about their life doesn't mean the culture change.
Mm. Mhm.
So be careful that you're not compounding things that may have things in common, but they're not the same.
Mm.
Just be very careful that you're not cutting edges. Like the, there's very little professions and careers out there that cutting edges are a good thing. And
Mm.
creative endeavors very seldom and very rarely benefit from cutting corners. Just say.
Mm-hmm.
Something
That's
I
the
won't
one I
regret
read. I
for the
was
thought.
like, oh my god.
So
Margaret
funny.
is just Margaret is she's just so cool.
Yeah. Margaret is living her best life, and
You
we can see
know,
that she is super happy in the comments. And
and
that I
she
love that
like
for her.
Margaret's just my girl. I'm not saying I would
Yeah.
kidnap her, but I mean, I'd probably keep her in my basement for a month or so just to laugh.
I feel like she would be a willing participant.
I feel like as long as I cooked and I baked, maybe we'd be
Yeah,
good.
as long as you have tea,
I have
baked
tea, a plethora
goods,
of tea.
and really good books,
I have both.
I'm pretty sure you don't need a white van. You just need to send her an Uber or a Lyft, and
So
she will be there.
that's what I need to do. I need to just sprinkle books and like scones and tea all the way from like Oregon to here.
Yeah,
Oh, I will definitely take the cats.
There you go. Done.
yeah, done deal.
Cat
Margaret, if
nap.
Margaret disappears or her background changes drastically or it looks a little too similar to Tiff backgrounds,
She
then
just said
you'll
she
know
was
where
in
she's at.
Scotland. Of course it's gonna change.
It's a date.
I love it. So, friends, is there anything else that you guys would like to touch about interracial romances? If there are any questions, not snarky questions, legit questions in the comments from the chat, this is the time. Or I'm going to start wrapping it up because we're past the 1 hour and it is a Sunday. Like, I love you all, but I would like to keep it under an hour and a half if I have to.
My bed's calling me and a book is calling me. So yeah. No, I love
Brownie
you
is
all.
calling me. That's what is calling
Ooh,
me.
what is?
Brownie. I
Oh,
got
So good.
brownies.
Oof. That sounds
So
delicious. Mm.
Tiff will open the basement door for volunteers. It's not
it
inhabited
depends on the
position, it's willing.
volunteer.
What is a snarky question? There's the yeah. Mm.
There you go.
Uh do you
Margaret.
think this have been more popular and or successful in the past decade? Like
You mean like interracial relationships?
What these? What's these?
yeah,
I think she
I'm
means more
wondering if
interracial
it's
romances.
yeah, I think so. You can
Mm.
clarify. Uh
I believe so. I just recently watched something. It was a I feel like it was a video with someone who was talking about. I mean, granted, I didn't. Her title is not what you got from the video, but
mhm,
she was talking about how she had released a book. I'm gonna say early 2000s. I don't remember exact dates or whatever. I know it was quite some time ago. And she only got like a few sales here or there, whatever. And then her sister started writing and she was having like lots of success. And so she decided she was going to go back to it. And she didn't make it sound like she learned any more craft or she tried anything different. The only thing that she did change was that she did write an interracial relationship versus a strictly, I don't remember if she said the original relationship was black or not, but it was just one race, whatever the one. And she said within 3 months, 4 months, she doubled what she had done before. And now
Mm.
she basically exclusively wrote interracial relationship, and she
mhm,
had quite a bit of success with that. So I do think on some levels, in some sections, yeah, it is probably a little bit more popular,
mhm.
successful, it depends on how you look at that, but I do think in some circles it might be a little bit more popular than it was, say, like
Yeah,
10-15 years ago.
I would
Yeah,
say so, and
definitely.
I feel like in media in general, I've been
Mhm,
noticing in the last even just 5 years. Notice like it will take me a minute because at least for me where I grew up, it's very common. so I don't blink at it as quickly or as easily as maybe some who aren't familiar or didn't grow up around interracial couples and relationships. But I'll find that suddenly a lot of commercials will show an interracial couple. Hallmark started finally introducing
Mhm.
a plethora of interracial couples, and even just either black couples or well, that's mostly what they've done so far. But I'm like, okay, so yeah, because I'm like, have they done any other culture? I don't think
They
so.
did have. I think there was an Indian
Oh, there might have been,
Mm,
well, like it's
or
interracial.
Middle Eastern, maybe.
mhm.
Yeah,
I'm
they've
not
done more
positive exactly.
interracial. Yeah,
Yeah,
they've done more interracial with different variety
but they
than.
also almost got
Yeah.
sued, so I think that's part of
Mm, oh,
why.
bless.
Yeah.
So in media in general, I feel like I've definitely noticed that it's becoming more common to represent that. And in the book world, I mean, it's been around for a while, but yes, I feel like there is more of a push. It's becoming more open.
Mhm.
It's sad because as an interracial writer, when it comes to finding book cover models, that's a whole
It's
discussion
hard.
for another
Oh
day.
Lord.
It is still detrimentally difficult to get to
Mhm.
find a variety. So hopefully now with this push in the media and in books, maybe photographers are going to hopefully take notice
Yeah.
and start adding more variety to what they offer for us authors when it comes to stuff.
Honestly, this is why the cartoonish illustrated covers started to get
Mhm.
really popular,
Mm,
because that was the way indie and trap pubs were able to diversify and kind of like correctly represent the characters. Because I remember there was a talk about the cover and the characters looking very white, and then when you read it, they're not. A lot
mm,
of the times the character was a black person, but the cover was someone who was like light brown at the very best,
mm,
and that got like a huge, like it was the talk of the town for a while, and that's when illustrated covers started to show up. Same thing when plus size characters. Like
mm,
there's so very little photography with plus size. Even if
Mhm.
it's just one of the couple, it's
mm,
very hard to find. So this is the other way that illustrated covers kind of like came in and, you know,
mm,
correctly represented was in the book. For me, I I'm gonna be honest. I have a hard time to correctly say if there's a boom or not, because I look for the things that I want to write and the things that I want to read. Do I want to read more Hispanic characters? I am going to hunt on the subcategories and put a gazillion kinds of keywords on Amazon to find those kind of books.
mm,
Same thing if I want plus size characters, same thing if I want to read black characters or Asian characters. But that's just me, and
mm,
this is why I may not have an accurate rating of it,
mm,
because I am just so intent on reading diversely and
mm,
minimize my white consumption. Because I mean,
Mhm.
when I open my TV, if I watch TV or when I go to the movies, pretty much everything that I'm watching is white people.
mhm.
So when the search lands in my hands, I am going to search everything but white. But that's just me. That's just me.
And Margaret, I would love to photograph as many interracial, multiracial, all types of people as I possibly could, but you also have to like rent the studio, pay the models, put everything out there, all the different stuff. So if y'all want to donate to my Ko-fi, I would love to get that going for you. Shameless plug, and yeah, I did it.
Good.
So Avery has a real question.
I
Are
think the
there
brownie
any
question was real.
differences? The brownie one? I mean, it's real, but I don't have a way to send you brownies, so you know. So are there any differences you have found in the way you market the interracial romances to find the right readers?
Ooh.
Hmm.
I mean, the category in Amazon, which is the main publisher that a lot of indie authors use, do have like subcategories for black romances and for interracial romances, and you can call to further be more specific in the kind of romance, and they will add you to that category. So from that start, do you have a way to make sure that your books reach the right readers? Now, if you're talking about social media, then hashtags, keywords, what are those?
See, and then for me, at least where I approach it is I I hope to entice them with the concept of the story so that hopefully more people just want to read the story and more people will
Mhm.
consume it, whether we have a variety of cultures and race. And I would hope that more people would open themselves up to
Yeah.
reading whether or not there's a biracial couple on the cover, or there's an interracial, or there's just black black male and a black female on the cover. I go about it pretty similarly to how I approach the other stories. I will say I personally, for the stories I some of the stories I upload, I do need to be more intentional about the categories, I think.
Yeah.
Because that'll be
I
good on
mean, I
Apple.
will say as a reader who search for those stories, I at some point there's going to be a moment that the interracial hashtag or black romance hashtag, things like that, will kind of like go over my head. But if when you're like listing the tropes, or you're explaining the plot, or you have a bit of a scene, like a bit of dialogue in those action tags, there's something that will clue me in that this person is not white. You don't have to tell me which, like, what what the racial is, but if it's enough that you will be that I will be like, that's not something a white person will do or say or think or or eat or whatever you're adding into that action tag. Let me go ahead and click on it and read the blurb and
Mm.
maybe see the categories. That's a way that you can sneak in that your book is has other racial characters, or that is an interracial, or that is a black, Hispanic, Asian, racial here romance.
I am big on the hashtags. I do try to search out hashtags that do have, Asian romance, black authors, like things like that. But also I like to try to look for other books that are comps and then see
Mm.
how they're doing it. See what
Mm.
they're adding, see what they're putting out there to see how I can then relate that to my specific brand. And I think that's a really good way to do it, because it also, and even if you can reach out to those authors and like do something, like a collab of some sort, you recommend their book, they recommend yours, or, um, you know, I also look like when I do, the newsletter swaps and stuff like that
Mm.
to try to see if I'm swapping with people who might have, a more diverse reader group than necessarily I do, or if I'm in certain people's reader groups, kind of looking at that. And you'd be surprised at how many, at least for Insta Love or some of the romance groups, how many of them will let you do, say, like a group takeover, or if
Mm.
you contact them, they'll let you post your new release, especially if it relates to, whatever their specific type of thing is. I have one person who just let me post in their group because my town is set in Georgia and her stories are in Georgia. So, like reach out to them and ask. And a lot of people
Mhm.
will, be very supportive. Of course, there are those that won't, but
Mm-hmm.
You know,
With everything.
Yeah,
never
for
hope that.
every 10 that will say yes, there's gonna be at least 3 to 4 that will say no.
Right.
It's just the amount of like, it's just life. It's not just authorship, it's just life. Um, and most authors do understand that if we have elements in our books that overlap, it means that our readership will overlap, which means that you might have readers that I don't have that I can, what, by collaborating with you in whichever way, means that I will get new readers and vice versa.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I think it's a matter of, at the end of the day, it's just like with any other story, you want to capture the reader with
Yeah.
what you got to do. You got to do your blurb and do the hooks and really, play with the tropes and do all that, cuz that's mostly what is going to get them to click and officially go forward. And then sometimes maybe they'll be surprised. They didn't know going in it was, a certain
Hmm.
type of culture or background or whatever, and they didn't realize it, but they're open to it and they're going to learn something. Like there's an author, the author I was reading, the Marriage of Convenience books. I didn't know
Oh yeah.
she's Indian, and she just released the like sixth book in the series like this weekend or last week. And I didn't know going in that it was an Indian American woman as the main character. And apparently she just hit like number 3 in the US, number 1 in Canada. And for her, as an Indian woman, she's thanking everyone because she's like, it's rare to see the Indian woman representation. And this character is now, number 1 in so many readers. And she didn't push it saying this is an Indian American, book or character, but so many people read it because they wanted to know the story. They loved, so also it's a matter of that we can bring in people who normally would be adverse to the variety and to the very, different cultures and stuff. And if we hook them with our stories, we can help also in that way, just help people learn and be open and accepting. And so there's many ways to play about it.
And don't
You
discount your blurbs. Like, that is like prime real estate, if you will.
Yeah.
Like you where's the one we just watched a workshop where someone was talking about how they put a gyno, but they also put a family doctor because it's two different ways of saying it.
ah
So
oh
like, look at the different way. Somebody also said they put like snowed in, but then they
mm,
also put like winter storm because that's
mm-hmm.
two different ways of saying it. So, like don't be afraid to add those tropes and those words into your blurb. I mean, don't just be like, interracial relationship. Gee, I had such and such with the interracial relationship and blah 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 blah. With the interracial, like don't do that. Like make it make sense. But
Mm-hmm.
like don't be afraid to drop. Like you don't have to say it's an interracial relationship, but you could drop like a cultural something. Like
Which I
I
put
didn't
in, yep.
understand why she made me take my shoes off at the door, but blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Somebody who's from that culture might get it. Or her mother calling me Mija, like I was like, what? But somebody did that. So like look at the different ways that you can
Mhm.
put those types of little snippets
Without
into your
again smacking people's
yeah,
faces with it.
into your
Yes.
your blurb and like use what you can, use what you have
Hmm.
to share
Exactly.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, friends, this was a wonderful conversation.
Mhm.
I am gonna say that everyone enjoyed it. For what I could see on the comments and how interactive it was, and how everyone was on like listening and on point and everything. Thank you again, Tiffany, for coming in. So last minute. So very much thankful for you
I hope I didn't
to step
disappoint.
up.
I hope
No,
I
at
Oh
did
no,
all.
you
everyone
did
Not
not.
at
Not at
all.
all.
You had
justice.
some great insight, and yes, it was a great
Yeah,
conversation.
it was a great conversation. I think this is one of the one of the few longish romance writers room. We've been here talking about interracial romance and cultures and all the wonderful diversity thing in the world for an hour and 30 minutes.
Well, I mean, it's the three of
So,
us. Did we not think
uh,
it would go long? Like,
that's the other thing. We do tend to talk a lot. We're very passionate about this. Um, so I am very so much glad that you're here, that everyone is here. Thank you, Des, because you're a little bit under the weather, but you still pulled through. I hope you enjoy the conversation,
I
and
did.
that it was something that took your mind off and your body off, on being under the weather.
Mhm.
um and if it so happens that you're like Morgan that missed the conversation, the replay will be up until YouTube decides to die in the future. So you'll be able to come back and watch it, and you can leave your thoughts and your questions down in the comments section if you're watching the replay.
Mhm.
Um, as of right now, we're just gonna wave and I'll let you all see the outro. Have a good Sunday, friends.